The crack of her palm against the woman's cheek split the cabin's silence. Not a stumble, not an accident. A strike deliberate, loud enough that even the engines seemed to hush. "Get out of here!" the flight attendant screamed, her voice jagged like broken metal. Rows of polished seats and half-finished champagne flutes froze mid-air. A businessman in the third row jerked his head up, eyes wide. A young couple stopped mid-conversation, lips parted, and in seat 2 Ampere, the black woman she had just hit did not move. She sat anchored, blazer still neat, hands folded calmly on the leather strap of her bag. She blinked once. That was all. The attendant's hand hovered near her face again, trembling not with fear but with a fury that demanded spectacle. Behind her, a security officer in black uniform stepped closer, muscles tense, his radio crackling. Passengers shifted in their seats, the tension cutting through the recycled air. And then the sound of a camera phone clicking on. A man 2 rows back lifted his device, the small red record light now another witness in the room. The CEO's jaw tightened just slightly, but she stayed silent. The air pressed heavy with expectation. Would she rise? Shout? Call for help? She did none of those things. Instead, she leaned back into her seat, as if the slap had been nothing more than turbulence. Her composure unsettled the very people trying to erase her. The flight attendant, flushed with adrenaline, leaned closer, spitting the words like venom. "You don't belong in this cabin. People like you don't buy seats like this." A murmur rippled from the aisle. A woman in business attire whispered to her neighbor, "This isn't right." Her voice barely audible, but enough. The current shifted. The security guard gestured, low and sharp. "Stand up, ma'am, now." But she didn't. She kept her eyes locked forward, her silence sharper than any rebuttal. Passengers waited, hanging on the stillness. Something electric lived in that pause, something heavier than the slap, louder than the insult. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The attendant's finger jabbed the air. "Security, take her out." Oh, the officer took another step, hand brushing his holster. The passengers stiffened. The man filming whispered, almost involuntarily, "Oh my God." But in seat 2 Ampere, the CEO remained still, not begging, not bending, a storm, waiting for its moment. The echo of that slap hadn't faded when the cabin shifted again. Rows of faces stunned, uncertain, tilted toward the scene like spectators at a trial. The flight attendant planted her palm on the armrest, leaning in so close her breath hit the CEO's cheek. "You think silence makes you strong? It makes you weak. Now move." The black woman didn't move. She didn't blink. Her gaze cut straight through the tirade, steady as steel. From the aisle, a passenger in a navy suit muttered, "This is out of line." But he stayed seated, caught between fear and decency. The security guard adjusted his stance. His hand hovered near the radio clipped to his belt, waiting for the command. The power dynamic in the cabin tilted, not toward order, but toward something more dangerous spectacle. The CEO exhaled once, long and slow, as if drawing the tension into her lungs only to release it on her terms. She clasped her hands tighter around her bag, still silent, still unyielding. Then came the escalation. The attendant snatched a folded boarding pass from the tray table and tore it in half with theatrical flair. The paper ripped like a verdict. She let the pieces fall to the floor. "She's not supposed to be here," the attendant barked. "Fraud. Pretender. Get her out." Gasps threaded through the cabin. A woman near the window clutched her pearl gray scarf, whispering, "She paid for that seat. I saw her." The man with the phone raised it higher now, red light blinking, every second recorded, every insult immortalized. The CEO finally shifted. Not to argue, not to plead. She leaned back, spine straight, voice calm as midnight. "This jet is not your courtroom, and you are not my judge." The attendant sneered. "Oh, we'll see about that." She turned to the guard. "Remove her." He hesitated. Just long enough for the atmosphere to break, just long enough for doubt to enter the room, because in that hesitation, the truth was beginning to show. The woman they tried to erase wasn't small. She wasn't powerless. She was waiting. And for the first time, the crew realized the silence was not submission. It was strategy. The pieces of the boarding pass still fluttered on the carpet when the cabin manager arrived. Tall, pressed uniform, a clipboard tucked under his arm like a weapon of authority. His eyes swept the cabin, landed on her, and narrowed with instant judgment. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The attendant stepped aside quickly, seizing her chance. She doesn't belong here. Tried to fake her way into first class. Already tore up her pass. The manager didn't ask questions. He crouched, scooped the torn paper from the floor, and dropped it on her lap like evidence. Fraudulent. Every time, the same story. Passengers murmured louder now. A man near the aisle whispered, "I saw her hand over a valid ticket." She scanned in, but the authority in the manager's voice drowned out reason. The security guard shifted closer. "Ma'am, stand up." She remained seated, shoulders squared, calm, stillness that cut sharper than resistance. The manager leaned down until his shadow fell across her. "Do you know what happens to liars at 30,000 feet? They don't fly. They get dragged off." Gasps rippled like turbulence. A teenager in the back row muttered, "This is messed up." His mother shushed him, but her eyes stayed locked on the unfolding scene. The CEO's jaw flexed, just barely. She breathed in, measured, then silence again. The attendant scoffed, mistaking quiet for defeat. She reached over, grabbed the woman's slim leather bag, and yanked it toward the aisle. The buckle clinked against the floor as she thrust it toward security. "This is evidence," she snapped. "She's hiding something." That was the moment the cabin turned. Phones tilted higher. Passengers leaned in. The room no longer looked like a luxury jet. It looked like a courtroom, a theater of injustice. The CEO raised her chin, voice low but cutting through everything. "You put your hands on me. You stole my property. And you believe you'll walk away from this?" The manager barked back. "You'll walk away, in handcuffs if we must." The guard reached again, firmer this time, fingers brushing her shoulder. The move was small, but it detonated in the silence. She didn't flinch. She didn't yield. Instead, her eyes lifted to meet the rows of witnesses now leaning forward, and for the first time, she spoke clearly, command threaded into every syllable. "Remember this moment. You are all watching a crime." The attendant froze, hand still clutching the bag. The manager's face flushed crimson. The guard hesitated. And the passengers knew this wasn't over. The storm was only beginning. The guard's fingers brushed her shoulder again, firmer this time. A hush fell over the cabin. Every passenger, every phone, every breath hung on what she would do next. She did not raise her voice. She did not resist. She simply reached into her blazer pocket, drew out a phone, and tapped the screen once. "Carla," she said evenly, her eyes never leaving the faces surrounding her. "Begin flight protocol. Log everything. Timestamp each incident." The name hit the air like a flare. The cabin manager frowned. "Who are you calling? Put that away." But Carla's voice already came through, calm, professional, unshaken by altitude or accusation. "Confirmed, ma'am. Protocol initiated. Video and audio from cabin feed syncing now. Crew IDs will be cross-referenced. Do you want escalation to corporate board?" The attendant blinked, color draining from her cheeks. "What board?" she snapped, but her voice cracked on the last word. The CEO's tone never shifted. "Stand by, Carla. They've already made contact with my property. Secure that on record." Passengers exchanged glances, murmurs rising again. A man whispered, "Property? Did she say her property?" Another muttered, "She sounds like she's in charge." The guard pulled his hand back, unease creeping into his stance. The badge on his chest didn't feel as heavy as it had a moment ago. The manager tried to rally, barking louder as if volume could replace authority. "Enough of this performance. You are not verified. You are not welcome here." The CEO finally turned to him, gaze sharp enough to cut. "What you just said is already logged. You'll hear it again, not from me, but from the compliance team reading your transcript." The man with the phone whispered, "She's serious. Look at her." The red recording light glowed brighter, as if the room itself had joined her side. The attendant crossed her arms, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. "You think calling some assistant scares us?" The CEO didn't flinch. "Fear isn't the goal. Truth is." The cabin grew tighter, the air charged. Passengers leaned forward, no longer passive spectators but reluctant jurors. For the first time, the crew hesitated. The slap, the torn ticket, the stolen bag, none of it had broken her. But one quiet phone call had shifted the weight of the entire cabin. And in that stillness, a new understanding dawned. This woman wasn't fighting for a seat. She was preparing to claim the whole plane. The cabin manager opened his mouth to strike back, but another voice cut through before he could. She's right. It came from the back, a young flight attendant in training, barely older than 20. Her uniform looked too new, her badge still stiff from the press. She stepped forward, eyes wide but steady. I saw her ticket scan green at the gate, she said, louder this time. She belongs in this seat. The cabin froze. All eyes turned. The manager's face hardened. Mia, he snapped. Back to your station. But Mia didn't move. Her hands trembled, yet her voice didn't. You can tear paper, but you can't tear the truth. She's not lying. A murmur rippled. The man recording whispered, Got that. Every word. The senior attendant sneered, trying to claw back control. She's a trainee, doesn't know protocol. Huh. From across the aisle, another voice rose, this time a passenger, a middle-aged woman with silver hair tucked into a scarf. She stood, holding her phone high. I saw it too. I watched the scanner light up. She was cleared. Gasps, shifts, momentum. The silence cracked open, and witnesses poured through. The manager's voice rose, desperate. Sit down, all of you. But the crowd wasn't sitting. A man in row 3 leaned forward. You just slapped a woman and called her a fraud. That's what we saw. The CEO stayed seated, eyes calm, listening. Her stillness pulled the words out of others. One by one, they filled the space. She hasn't raised her voice once. She paid for that seat. This is discrimination. The weight of community shifted. It was no longer one woman against the crew. It was the room against injustice. The attendant folded her arms tighter, jaw clenched. They don't know what they're talking about. The CEO finally lifted her gaze to meet her accuser. Her voice cut low, deliberate. No, they know exactly what they're talking about. You're just afraid they said it out loud. Phones buzzed, screens glowed, eyes recorded. The cabin had transformed not a jet at all, but a stage. Every witness now part of the script, every line logged, every insult immortalized. And at the center, the CEO sat unmoved, letting the storm swirl until it belonged entirely to her. The manager's composure cracked. His voice sharpened, slicing through the cabin like static. Enough of this circus. She is not a client. She's an imposter wasting our time. The words rang heavy. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances. Phones tilted higher. The senior attendant leaned in again, venom dripping. Women like you try this all the time. Fake cards, fake tickets, always the same scam. That phrase, women like you, landed harder than the slap had. A collective gasp rippled through the rows. The silver-haired passenger shook her head. I can't believe you just said that. The trainee, Mia, stepped forward again. This is wrong. You can't keep calling her a fraud when you know her ticket was real. The manager spun on her, eyes blazing. One more word and you're finished. But Mia stood taller, voice steady now. If telling the truth costs me this job, so be it. The air thickened, tension pressed down on every seat, every pair of eyes. Even the guard shifted, uncertainty creeping into his stance. The CEO still hadn't raised her voice. She sat steady, hands folded in her lap, absorbing every insult like fuel. The attendant smirked, mistaking silence for surrender. She grabbed the torn ticket scraps from the floor, held them up, and dropped them in the CEO's lap. Trash, just like your story. The insult hit the cabin harder than the act itself. Phones caught the gesture from every angle. Murmurs turned to outrage. She's not trash, a man near the aisle barked. You're humiliating her, another said. This isn't protocol, it's prejudice, someone else added. The manager raised his voice louder, desperate to drown them out. Security! Remove her immediately. She's a threat to this flight. The guard hesitated, sweat glinting on his brow. The word threat didn't match the woman sitting calm, composed, unshaken in 2 Ampere. The CEO finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her head and spoke, each word a blade. You called me a fraud. You stole my property. You tried to erase me with a torn ticket, and you believe you'll walk away clean. Her voice was low, measured, but it carried louder than their shouting. The room fell still again. Passengers leaned forward, phones recording, breaths held. And in that silence, the crew's authority cracked wider. The storm wasn't at its peak yet, but everyone knew the next strike would decide everything. The command snapped like a whip. Get her out now. The security guard stepped forward, hand clamping down on the CEO's armrest. His other hand hovered near her shoulder, ready to drag her into the aisle. Passengers gasped. Phones jerked higher. The silver-haired woman half rose from her seat. "Don't touch her!" The CEO didn't flinch. She sat still, eyes fixed on the manager standing above her. Her silence mocked their power more than words ever could. The attendant reached down, snatched her leather bag from the floor, and shoved it into the guard's hands. "Evidence," she spat. "She doesn't belong here. She stole her way in." The bag hit the guard's chest with a dull thud. For a moment, even he looked unsure. The word "stole" didn't match the woman seated in quiet authority before him. The manager leaned closer, voice sharp, each syllable dripping disdain. "Here's what's going to happen. You're leaving this cabin in handcuffs, and everyone watching will know you tried to cheat your way into first class." The cabin pulsed with outrage. A teenager shouted, "She didn't cheat!" His mother's voice followed, trembling but fierce. "She hasn't done anything." Mia, the trainee, stepped forward again, voice breaking but louder than before. "You can't do this! You're fabricating a crime that doesn't exist!" The manager's face darkened. "You're finished." He jabbed a finger toward her chest. "You'll be jobless by landing." But Mia didn't retreat. She held her ground, hands clenched at her sides. Better jobless than complicit. The guard shifted, caught between orders and conscience. He gripped the bag tighter, but his other hand hovered uselessly above the CEO's shoulder. And still, she didn't move. She lifted her gaze, steady, unbroken, and spoke softly. So softly it forced the room to lean closer. "Touch me again, and every witness in this cabin will testify. Not for me, against you." The guard froze. The weight of dozens of recording phones pressed heavier than any order from his superior. The attendant hissed, "Don't listen to her." But the passengers' voices erupted, overlapping, a chorus of defiance. "She's right. This is abuse. Leave her alone." The cabin wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged, alive, shifting against the very crew that claimed control. And through it all, the CEO sat motionless, commanding the storm with nothing but stillness. The guard's hand hovered, trembling between force and hesitation. The cabin manager barked again, desperate. "Do your job, drag her out." But the command fell flat. The guard's eyes flicked to the row of raised phones, then back to the woman still seated in 2 Ampere. And that's when she moved. Not frantic, not defensive. Measured. She retrieved her phone from the armrest and tapped once. "Carla," she said, calm as if ordering coffee, "we are escalating to phase 2. The voice on the other end came instantly, crisp and composed. "Confirmed. Logging language used. Fraud. Trash. Thief. Incident time-stamped. Crew IDs flagged. Compliance board notified in real time." The attendant's jaw dropped. "What board? What are you even talking about?" The CEO didn't look at her. She stared straight ahead, her voice steady as steel. "The one that decides whether you have a career tomorrow." Passengers erupted in whispers. The teenager blurted, "She's serious, she's got them on record." His mother nodded, gripping her phone tighter. The manager's face blanched. This is bluff." Mia stepped closer, chin lifted. "Number, this is accountability." The CEO tilted her head, eyes sharp. "Every insult you've thrown is already in a file with your name on it. Every order you barked, every slur you spat preserved." Ugh. The attendant folded her arms, sneering through the crack in her composure. "You can't touch us." The CEO's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "You're right. I won't touch you, but the system you work for will." Gasps. Murmurs. A passenger in row 4 whispered, "She's not bluffing. Look how calm she is." The guard finally stepped back, lowering the bag he still held. The weight of it seemed suddenly radioactive, a burden he no longer wanted. The manager, voice brittle now, snapped, "Security protocol overrides your little game. You don't belong here." The CEO turned to face him fully for the first time. Her tone cut clear, deliberate. "You keep saying I don't belong, but belonging isn't yours to give. And soon you'll realize this jet never belonged to you." The words landed heavy. Passengers sat stunned, hanging on each syllable. Phones kept rolling. The cabin felt less like a plane and more like a courtroom, one where the verdict was already shifting. And at the center, the black CEO sat anchored, calm, and unstoppable, no longer silent, but undeniable. The manager's throat worked, but no words came out. His authority, once booming, now flickered like a dying light. The CEO rose slowly from her seat. Not rushed, not frantic. Every movement deliberate, as if the cabin itself moved with her. Passengers leaned forward, phones tilted higher, the hum of engines swallowed by anticipation. She faced the crew head-on. Her voice carried without force, clear and final. "You've called me a fraud. You've called me trash. You've called me a thief. And yet, I am still standing here. Do you wonder why?" The attendant's smirk faltered. The guard shifted uneasily. Mia's eyes shone with something between relief and awe. The CEO continued, her words measured like a verdict. "Because this cabin doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me." Gasps shot through the air. Someone whispered, "What did she just say?" Another answered, "She owns it. She owns the jet." The manager scoffed, clinging to the last threads of denial. "Ridiculous. A stunt." Oh, her phone chimed. Carla's voice came through, amplified by the quiet. "Confirmation complete. Corporate registry updated on cabin feed. Ownership: Dr. Elise Grant, CEO of Grant Aeronautics, primary shareholder of Horizon Jet Charter." The name hit like thunder. Passengers erupted. A man in row 3 muttered, "I knew I'd seen her face before. Forbes cover last year." The silver-haired woman clasped her scarf tighter, tears welling. They humiliated their own employer. The manager staggered back, clipboard slipping from his hand. The attendant's arms fell to her sides, suddenly limp. The guard lowered his gaze, ashamed. The CEO, Elise Grant, stood tall, her presence filling the cabin more powerfully than any shout. "You struck me thinking I was powerless. You stole from me thinking I was beneath you. But I am your employer. I am the owner of this jet, and the only thing you've proven is your prejudice." Phones buzzed, recording the declaration. Passengers clapped softly at first, then louder, until the cabin swelled with applause. Mia stepped forward, voice trembling but proud. "Dr. Grant, I'm sorry. They tried to silence me, but I couldn't let them." Elise placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You didn't let them. You spoke, and that's what changes the room." The storm had shifted. The verdict was written, and for the first time the crew stood exposed, powerless before the truth they had tried to bury. The cabin cracked open like glass under pressure. Applause spread row by row, shaky at first, then relentless. Passengers who had sat silent now stood, phones raised high, voices uniting in disbelief and vindication. "She owns the jet. They humiliated their boss. This is insane on camera." The manager stumbled backward, the clipboard clattering to the floor. His face had drained to a pale mask. The senior attendant pressed herself against the galley wall, arms crossed but trembling. Even the security guard stepped back, his authority crumbling under the weight of truth. Mia, the trainee, stood tall now, no longer just a quiet voice in the background. Her words rang clear. "You don't get to erase her, not twice, not ever." The silver-haired passenger raised her phone higher. "The world's going to see this. Every insult, every strike, every word." The manager shook his head, muttering, "No, no, this can't," but his voice was drowned out by the chorus around him. Elise Grant didn't need to shout. She didn't need to demand. She stood steady in the aisle, letting the storm consume those who had built it. Passengers became witnesses. Witnesses became advocates. The cabin wasn't neutral anymore, it was her courtroom, and the verdict was unanimous. You struck her. You tore her ticket. You stole her bag. You lied. Each accusation landed like a hammer, building momentum, each voice stacking atop the other until the air felt charged, almost electric. The crew shrank beneath it, shoulders curled inward, their earlier bravado shattered. And still, Elise remained calm. She turned once to Mia, giving the young woman the smallest nod of approval, then swept her gaze across the rows of passengers. "You've all seen what happened," she said, her voice even resonant. "You know what it means. Prejudice is loud, but justice is louder." Her words ignited another wave of applause, louder than before, echoing off the cabin walls. The manager tried one last gasp of control. "Everyone, sit down, this is still my flight." But the guard shook his head. For the first time he spoke. "Not anymore." Phones caught every second. Hashtags sparked in real time. By the time the jet touched ground, this wouldn't just be a story, it would be a reckoning. And in that reckoning, the crew's authority dissolved entirely. The applause still reverberated when Elise lifted her phone again. Not hurried, not theatrical, just calm, like she was ordering the weather. Carla, she said, voice carrying across the cabin, we are moving to final enforcement. The manager's head snapped up. Final. What? Passengers fell silent again, their eyes darting between Elise and the crew, who now looked less like professionals and more like defendants awaiting sentence. Carla's voice returned, steady, clipped, unmistakably official, standing by. Do you authorize immediate termination of all involved crew? Access badges? Payroll credentials? Horizon IDs? The words detonated inside the cabin. The attendant's face drained white. She shook her head furiously. You can't do this. You don't have that authority. Elise turned, her eyes locking on her accuser, and spoke with the precision of a judge delivering a verdict. I am your employer. I sign your paychecks. I fund the uniform on your back. And I now terminate your employment. The attendant staggered, mouth opening soundlessly, as if the air itself had been ripped away. Carla's voice cut in again. Processing. Termination complete. ID 4321 revoked. Payroll revoked. Access badge revoked. Employee no longer recognized in Horizon system. The attendant fumbled for her badge, pressed it against the reader near the galley wall. The light blinked red. Gasps erupted. Phones zoomed in. One passenger muttered, "She's locked out right here, live." Another whispered, "She's finished." The manager lunged forward, desperation spilling out of him. "This isn't legal. You can't fire me mid-flight." Elise's gaze was ice. "Then you should have thought about legality before you called me trash in my own cabin." She lifted the phone again. "Carla, terminate the manager. Effective immediately." The man's clipboard clattered to the floor again as Carla's voice echoed. Processing termination. Manager ID 2257 revoked. System access disabled. Badge invalidated. The manager pulled his lanyard from his neck, swiped it desperately against the wall reader. Red. Passengers cheered. The teenager clapped so hard his phone shook. Mia stood taller, her eyes wide with vindication. Elise turned slowly to the guard, who now looked like a man staring down his own collapse. "And you," she said. His lips trembled. "Ma'am, I was just following orders." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You put your hands on me, twice, and you held property stolen from me. Following orders does not erase choices." He swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the rows of phones recording his shame. Elise spoke into her device again. "Carla, terminate the guard. Effective immediately." The man lowered his head, as though the weight of his career had just been ripped from him mid-air. Passengers gasped again when his badge flickered red, too. Someone whispered, "All three, gone, right here." The silence that followed wasn't relief yet. It was awe. The kind of silence that comes when power shifts so suddenly the human mind struggles to keep pace. The attendant's voice broke the quiet, high-pitched cracking under collapse. "Please, please, don't do this. I have children. I didn't mean—" Elise's eyes softened for the first time, but only slightly. "You meant every word. You meant the slap. You meant the insult. You only regret the consequence." The woman collapsed back against the galley wall, tears streaking her uniform. The manager tried one final, feeble lunge for authority. "This is overreach. The union will—" Elise cut him down with a single sentence. "You don't bargain with the person who owns the company." The words dropped heavy. Phones caught them all. The applause reignited, louder, sharper, like a verdict delivered by the entire cabin. Mia stepped forward, shoulders squared, voice carrying strong now. "Dr. Grant, what about me? They threatened to fire me for speaking up." "And a 40. Elise placed a hand gently on her shoulder, her first true gesture of warmth. "And that's why you'll be promoted. Effective today." Mia gasped. The passengers erupted again, this time with cheers, laughter, relief. Someone shouted, "She deserves it." Another added, "Justice served." The cabin manager slumped into a jump seat, defeated. The attendant slid down the wall, hands covering her face. The guard buried his face in his palms, and at the center of it all, Elise Grant stood composed, blazer unwrinkled, dignity unshaken. She spoke one last command into her phone. "Carla, log this incident in full. Forward transcripts to legal, compliance, and press. Ensure this recording reaches the board by landing." "Confirmed," Carla replied. "Incident officially archived. Terminations final. Promotion recorded." The cabin had transformed into a courtroom, and justice had been delivered before witnesses, phones, and the world. Elise turned to the passengers, her voice now not for the guilty, but for the watching. You've seen what prejudice does when unchecked. You've also seen what silence can do when it belongs to the right person. Remember this moment, because power is not in the insult, it's in the response. The cabin roared with applause, a thunder of hands against leather seats and clinking glasses, and as Elise returned calmly to her seat, the storm she had endured was over, not because she screamed, not because she begged, but because she chose the sharpest weapon of all, dignity enforced with power. The cabin felt different now. The air no longer carried the sting of insult or the sharp edge of fear. It carried relief, vindication, awe. Passengers whispered to each other, checking their phones, already seeing comments and shares explode online. Number, Justice in the Sky. Number, Elise Grant. Prejudice exposed. But Elise didn't check her phone. She didn't need to. She sat calmly in her seat, blazer pressed, hands folded. The storm was over, and the silence now belonged to her. The manager shifted uneasily, face pale, staring down at the useless badge in his hands. The attendant still sobbed quietly near the galley wall, tears streaking across the makeup she had worn like armor hours earlier. The guard sat hunched, his head in his hands. Their power was gone, stripped away not by shouting, not by force, but by a voice calm enough to cut deeper than any blade. The teenager who had shouted earlier leaned across the aisle to his mom, whispering loud enough for others to hear. She didn't even yell, not once. His mother nodded, voice soft but firm. That's what real power looks like. Mia, the trainee, still stood frozen near Elise's seat, her promotion echoing in her ears like a song she couldn't believe belonged to her. She whispered, "Dr. Grant, why didn't you just tell them sooner? That you owned all this?" Elise turned her head slightly, her gaze kind but steady. Because power isn't something you announce. It's something you prove when others try to erase you. Her words traveled the cabin like a sermon. Passengers nodded, some with tears, some with clenched fists as if remembering their own scars. The silver-haired woman spoke next, her voice trembling. "I saw what they did to you, and I've had it happen to me too. Different place, same tone, same words. You don't belong here." Elise's expression softened, but her answer carried weight. Then today wasn't just my fight. It was ours. Phones kept recording. Streams kept climbing. Millions were already watching a courtroom that had unfolded at 30,000 feet. The cabin manager tried once more, his voice faint, barely audible. "You've destroyed us." Elise turned to him, her tone level. "Number, you destroyed yourselves. I just held up the mirror." A hush fell again, deeper this time. Final. The kind of silence that comes when a truth lands so heavy there's nothing left to argue. Carla's voice came once more through Elise's phone. "Dr. Grant, corporate board requests a closing statement for public record. Do you wish to provide one now?" Elise rose to her feet again, facing the rows of passengers, the crew stripped of titles, the witnesses who had become her chorus. She spoke clearly, her voice resonant with the authority of someone who carried history in her bones. "You all saw it. A slap meant to humiliate, words meant to erase, a theft meant to strip dignity. But dignity doesn't live in paper, it doesn't live in badges, and it cannot be taken by prejudice. It belongs to those who stand when silence is easier." She paused, letting her words sink in. Phones tilted higher, hearts beat faster. "You called me a fraud in a jet I own. You called me trash in a company I built. You tried to reduce me to nothing. But the truth is this. I am not the result of your insults. I am the result of every door you tried to close. And I don't need to shout to make you hear me. My existence is louder than your prejudice will ever be." The cabin exploded into applause, a roar of hands and voices, the sound of justice echoing inside steel walls. Some passengers stood, clapping until their palms reddened. Others wiped tears from their eyes, shaking their heads in disbelief at the power they had just witnessed. Mia whispered almost reverently, This is history." Elise lifted her phone one last time. "Carla, log final statement. Close the file." "Logged," Carla replied. "Incident archived. Distribution confirmed." Elise lowered the device, her expression serene. She didn't need to say more. The cabin had spoken for her. The world would speak next. The applause lingered, then softened, then faded into silence again. Not the uneasy silence of injustice, not the charged silence of anger, but the silence of respect. Passengers settled back into their seats, eyes still fixed on her, as though they were afraid to look away from a living reminder that justice could be immediate, quiet, and absolute. The manager whispered to himself, broken, "We thought she didn't belong." Elise's final words cut through the hush, low and deliberate, the drop, the mic line that would live forever in clips, in headlines, in memory. "I don't need to record this moment, I am the result of it." And with that, she sat back down, calm, anchored, while the world outside waited to hear the story that had already changed everyone inside.